Hey crocheters, this is Shannon with Dogwood Crochet, and today I'm going to show you how to crochet these beautiful braided puff stockings. They are a lovely piece that you can hang on your mantle for Christmas this year, and they have this really nice textured look to them. I will link the full written pattern in the description box, and so you can go and check out that pattern on my Etsy shop. So to get started, you're going to need a 10mm hook and 2 balls of number 6 super bulky yarn. I'm using Lion Brand Woolly Stick and Quick, and this is the color Fossil. And then you'll need a tape measure and a yarn needle and some scissors. All right, so we're going to start out by doing a foundation single crochet. We're going to do 45 foundation single crochets. So to do that, we're going to make a slip knot. And then we're going to chain 2. And then we're going to work into this first chain these 2 loops here. So the back bump and the back loop here. We're going to place our hook under that, yarn over, pull up a loop. So then we'll have 2 loops on our hook, yarn over, pull through 1, and then yarn over, pull through 2. So that was our first foundation single crochet. And now we have this here. We're going to work into these 2 loops from the single crochet that we just created. So go under these 2 loops, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 1 loop, and then yarn over, pull through both loops. So now that's 2 single crochets that we've made. And then again, we're going to find the one that we just made, find these 2 loops here on the bottom, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 1 loop, and then yarn over, pull through both loops. So we just continue this foundation single crochet until we have 45 stitches. So I'm going to do that, and then I'll come back for row 2. All right, so I just finished my 45 foundation single crochets. If you don't want to do foundation single crochets, you can just chain and then single crochet until you have 45 stitches. Then for row 2, we're going to chain 1 and turn. And then we are going to slip stitch in our first 2 stitches. So this is going to be part of the toe. This is the toe end, the other end is the cuff. So 2 slip stitches. And then we're going to single crochet in the back loop only of the next 13 stitches. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. All right, so now we're going to start our first decrease. So again, we did 2 slip stitches in the first 2, and then we did 13 single crochet back loop only. Now we're going to skip the next stitch and single crochet in the back loop only of the next stitch. And I'm going to place my stitch marker here on the stitch that we just did. Then we're going to skip the next stitch and then single crochet back loop only into all of the remaining stitches of the row. So we just decreased by 2 stitches for this row. So we had 45 stitches in our first row, and now at the end of this row 2, we should have 43 stitches. And the reason that we're decreasing is so that we can make an angle for the heel of the stocking. So you'll notice that as we work more decreases as the rows go on, you'll have kind of a pointy part of this work, and that will be the kind of basis for our stocking heel. As we work more rows, you'll start to see this heel take more shape, but it should start to angle this way as we decrease more. Now we're going to chain 1 and turn, and then we're going to single crochet in the back loop only of the first 4 stitches. And 4. So this is our cuff side. So this is the part that we'll be folding over when it's all done. So now what we're going to do is start our first row of puff stitches. All right, so now we're going to work our puff stitches to give that braided look. So we're going to skip over the next stitch, and we're going to single crochet in the stitch after that. Now we're going to work backwards into that stitch that we just skipped. So we're going to do a puff stitch. So we're going to yarn over, insert our hook into that skipped stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop. We'll have 3 loops on the hook. And we're going to yarn over, insert our hook into that stitch again, and yarn over, pull up a loop, and we'll have 5 loops on the hook, and then yarn over, pull through all 5 loops. So that's our first puff stitch. And then we'll just continue this again. So we'll skip 1 stitch, single crochet into the next stitch, and then work a puff stitch into the stitch that we just skipped. And we just repeat this all the way across. So we just continue doing these puff stitches until we have 3 stitches left in our row. And then when we have 3 stitches left, I will come back and show you what to do at that point. Okay, I'm coming up on the end, but I wanted to show you what I do when I get to the stitch marker. So I just completed a puff stitch, and I should skip this next stitch and work a single crochet into the marked stitch. But we want to actually replace our stitch marker after we work our next puff stitch, because it's 2 stitches away now, and we want to do our single crochet and then our puff stitch so that we've done 2 more stitches. So I'm going to take my stitch marker out and work the single crochet, and then do my puff stitch. And when I replace that stitch marker, I'm going to put it into the puff stitch that I just worked. The pattern will also have the number of stitches that you need to have at each like increase and decrease. So if you'd rather just count each time and not have the stitch marker, not have to worry about replacing it, that works too. That's another option if you prefer that. And so the point of the stitch marker is just to mark where we're increasing and decreasing, but whenever we work these puff stitch rows, we won't be increasing or decreasing, we'll just be staying the same. So we should still have 43 stitches at the end of row 3, which is what we started with. All right, so we're going until we have 3 stitches left in our row, which now we have 3 left. So we are going to single crochet in our next stitch. We're not skipping anything, we're just going to single crochet And now we have 2 stitches left. These are our slip stitches, and we're going to slip stitch into these again. So this is, remember, this is the toe. So we're doing slip stitches here because we want the toe to be kind of narrower and easier to cinch at the end of this. We don't need it to be as wide as the rest of the stocking. So that's the end of row 3. Now for row 4, we're going to chain 1 and turn. And then we'll be basically repeating the puffs that we just did, but in the reverse order. So we're going to slip stitch in our first 2 stitches. And be sure to slip stitch kind of loosely, otherwise they might be difficult to work into. So slip stitch in our first 2, and then we're going to single crochet in the next one. So there's our toe. And then we're going to repeat our puff stitch repeat. So we're going to skip the next stitch and single crochet into the next stitch. And then we'll work our puff stitch backwards into our skipped stitch. Just like that. And again, so with the puff stitches, we're not increasing or decreasing. So you'll just replace that stitch marker when you get there. And for this row 4, we're going to work these puff stitches until you have 4 stitches left at the end of your row. And that'll be for the cuff. All right, so now I'm coming up on my stitch marker here. And so because it's 1 stitch away, I want to replace this stitch marker when I do my next stitch, which is the single crochet. Even though we're skipping over it, we want it to be marked at 1 stitch here. So I'm going to pull that out and then place it in the single crochet that I just worked. And then we're going to work backwards with our puff stitch. And just continue this all the way across. And like I said, do this until you have 4 stitches left in the row. And then I'll come back and show you what to do at the end. All right, so I just worked my last puff stitch and now I have 4 stitches left in the row, and I'm just going to single crochet in the back loop only of each of those 4 stitches. And then chain 1 and turn. And now we are going to single crochet in the back loop only of these next stitches until we get to this stitch marker. And then once we get to the stitch marker, we're going to do a decrease. Okay, so we just single crocheted in the back loop only of these first 26 stitches. And now we've come up on the stitch marker. So we're going to skip over 1 stitch and then single crochet in the back loop only of that marked stitch. And then we'll replace our stitch marker. And then we're going to skip the next stitch and then single crochet in the back loop only. And we will do that until we have our 2 slip stitches left at the end. So that's 12 stitches that we did there. And then we should have 2 left, and we will slip stitch into those last 2 stitches. All right. So now we just did a decrease, so now we should have 41 stitches at the end of this row. We'll chain 1 and turn. And then we're going to do another decrease in this row. So we're going to work slip stitches into our first 2 stitches again. And then we're going to single crochet in the back loop only of the next 11 stitches until we get to that stitch marker. Nine, 10, and 11. All right, so we just did 11, and then we're going to skip over this next stitch and then single crochet in the back loop only of our marked stitch. And then we will replace our stitch marker. And then we are going to skip over the next stitch, and then we'll single crochet in the back loop only of all of the remaining stitches of the row. And so at the end of this row 6, you should have 39 stitches. All right, on to row 7, we'll chain 1 and turn. And now you can see the heel is kind of starting to take its shape. It's angling that way. So that's why we do those decreases there. So the stitch marker is basically marking this point at which we are decreasing and the point at which the heel will kind of stick out. All right, so for row 7, we're going to work a puff stitch repeat again. So we'll single crochet in the back loop only of the first 4 stitches. So remember, that's for the cuff that we'll be folding over at the end. So do that for the first 4. And then we'll do our puff stitch. So we'll skip 1 stitch, single crochet in the next, and then work a puff stitch into the skipped stitch. And we just repeat this all the way across until we have the 3 stitches left. Then when we have the 3 stitches left, we'll work 1 single crochet and then 2 slip stitches. Oops. And so at this point in the pattern, we're done decreasing. We should have 39 stitches at the end of each row for the rest of the stocking until we begin increasing again. So we're not decreasing anymore, but when you do get to that stitch marker, it might be helpful to carry it forward. If you don't want to deal with the stitch marker anymore, that's totally fine too. The pattern will have the written number of which stitch and when to increase at when we're ready to begin increasing. All right, we're at the end now, and we'll just do our single crochet and then our 2 slip stitches. So that's the end of row 7. We'll chain 1 and turn. And so the when we're not increasing or decreasing, we'll be doing a 4-row repeat for this pattern. And so that will consist of rows 7 through 10. So that row that we just worked, row 7, is the first row that will repeat going forward. And then for row 8, let me just move this stitch marker so it's not making noise. All right, row 8, we're going to start with our 2 slip stitches again. And then our 1 single crochet. And then we're going to do work our puff stitches. And just do this all the way across until we have the 4 stitches left in the row. We'll work the single crochet in the back loop only of the last 4 stitches to do our cuff, and then that'll be the end of row 8. So row 8 you should have, row 8 you should have 39 stitches at the end of the row. We're not increasing or decreasing. All right, so we just continue this, and then I will come back at the end of row 8, and then I'll get you started on row 9. All right, we're at the end of row 8 here. I have 4 stitches left. I'm going to single crochet in the back loop only of the last 4 stitches, and chain 1 and turn. So it's starting to look like a stocking, which is exciting. And then here is the cuff, so it'll fold over like this, just to help you visualize as you're working it before we assemble. So now for row 9, all we're going to do is single crochet in the back loop only of every stitch until we come to our last 2 slip stitches. Then we will slip stitch in the last 2, but otherwise every stitch in this row 9 should be a single crochet in the back loop only. And again, we'll have 39 stitches because we're not increasing or decreasing. So I'll just work this and I'll come back at the end of row 9. All right, we're at the end of row 9. I just single crocheted in the back loop only of each stitch across. I have 2 stitches left. They're my slip stitches, so I'm going to slip stitch into them. And then chain 1 and turn. And now for row 10, this is the last row of our 4-row repeat. We're going to slip stitch in our first 2 slip stitches. And then just single crochet in the back loop only of each stitch across. And again, row 10, we are not increasing or decreasing. We should have 39 stitches at the end of row 10. I just finished row 10. So now for rows 11 through 20, we're going to repeat our 4-row repeat until the end of row 20. So row 11, we're going to do what we did in row 7 with our puff stitches. Row 12, we'll do what we did in row 8. Row 13, we'll do what we did in row 9. And then row 14, we'll do what we did in row 10. So that'll take us up until row 18. And then for rows 19 and 20, we will repeat rows 7 and 8. So we'll be ending on our puff stitches like this at the end of row 20. So just continue working this until the end of row 20, and then I'll come back for row 21. All right, so I just finished row 20, and this is what it's looking like. And now we're going to start row 21, so that'll be our first increase row. So we just ended on our row 8 repeat, so it was a puff stitch. Now we're going to increase. So we're going to, we chain 1 and turn, and then we're going to single crochet in the back loop only of the first 25 stitches, or until we get to our stitch marker if you're following along with the stitch marker. So we're just going to single crochet in the back loop only until we get to the stitch marker. All right, and then once we get to our stitch marker, we're going to remove it, and we're going to place 3 single crochet into the back loop only of our marked stitch. So this is an increase. So that's 1, 2, and 3, all in that same stitch. And then I'm going to replace my stitch marker into that second stitch that we did in our increase, so the middle one. And then just continue single crocheting in the back loop only until we get to our last 2 slip stitches. Alright, and then we have our 2 stitches left. We'll just slip stitch into those. Chain 1 and turn, and then we'll begin row 22. So that was the end of row 21. We should now have 41 stitches at the end of row 21 because we increased by 2. So we went from 39 to 41 stitches. And now for row 22, we're going to do another increase in this row. So we're going to start out by slip stitching in our first 2 stitches. And then we're going to single crochet in the back loop only until we get to that stitch marker. All right, so we single crocheted in the back loop only until we got to our stitch marker. So we did 2 slip stitches and then 12 single crochets in the back loop only. And then again, we're going to increase here in our marked stitch. So we'll place 3 single crochets in the back loop only, all in this same stitch here. And then we're going to mark that second stitch in our increase. So the middle one. And then we will just continue to single crochet in the back loop only until the end of the row. So I'll keep doing this and then I will come back for row 23. Just finished row 22 and we ended with 43 stitches. You can see here's our increase, so it's starting to point out a little bit like the heel. And now for row 23, we're going to do our puff stitch repeat, and we're not increasing, so we're going to chain 1 and turn. And then just like we did for the other rows with the puff stitches, we'll start with 4 single crochets in the back loop only. And then we will do our puff stitch repeat. So we'll skip a stitch, do our single crochet, and then work the puff stitch into the skipped stitch. And so we just continue doing this until the end of our row. We're not increasing or decreasing. We don't increase or decrease ever in this pattern when we're working our puff stitches. And when you get to the stitch marker, just replace it where you're at and then work the last 2 slip stitches for the toe at the end. So I'm going to finish up this row and then I will come back for row 24. All right, I just did my last puff stitch. And then we're going to do we have 3 stitches left. We'll do our single crochet and then our 2 slip stitches. And we should have 43 stitches at the end of this row, which is row 23. And we'll chain 1 and turn. And then we have 1 row of puff stitches left to do. We'll do slip stitch in the first 2 stitches of the row, and then a single crochet, and then we will do our puff stitch repeat all the way across until the end. Then at the end, with 4 stitches left, we will single crochet in the back loop only of those last 4 stitches for the cuff. So we're basically just repeating what we've done for every other puff stitch row, but we just have 43 stitches this time instead of a different number. So just continue this until the end of row 24. All right, row 25 now, we're gonna chain 1 and turn, and then all we need to do is single crochet in the back loop only of each stitch across. We're not increasing or decreasing. We will end with 43 stitches. So single crochet, back loop only, each stitch across. That's for row 25. And then I will come back for row 26, which is our last row, and that will be our last increasing row. We'll finish that row up, and then I will show you how to assemble this. All right, we're at the end of row 25. Just do our last 2 slip stitches, and then we will start row 26. Chain 1 and turn. Oops. All right, so for row 26, we will do our first 2 slip stitches. And then we will single crochet in the back loop only until we get to our stitch marker. All right, so we just single crocheted in the back loop only of the next 13 stitches, get to the stitch marker, and then we are going to place 3 single crochets in the back loop only of that marked stitch. And now we're all done with our stitch marker, so we can set that aside. And then we will just single crochet in the back loop only of all of our remaining stitches. Until we get to the end. So we should end with 45 stitches at the end of row 26. And this is our last row, and then we will be ready to assemble. All right, so I just ran out of yarn, which is surprising because I weighed my other sample and I was supposed to have enough yarn, but I'm thinking maybe it has to do with this being a multicolored color variation, and for my other stocking I just used the solid colored red. So be sure to check on the yardage. The pattern calls for at least 2 skeins of this size of yarn, so all the solid colors come with 106 yards, and I had this much left of my second skein for the red one, so 212 yards should definitely cover it. For this color, the fossil, this only has 87 yards in a skein, so I'm thinking that's probably why I ran out. But just be sure to double check that, maybe buy an extra skein just in case. So I'm going to be finishing this up with a similar colored yarn, and hopefully this won't be too noticeable since it'll mostly just be for the seam to join the stocking. And hopefully this gray color kind of blends in. But I'm just doing a magic knot there to join my yarn, and then I'll finish out row 26 with the single crochets in the back loop only. And then the last one. All right. So now what we want to do for assembly, So if you look at your work, there's a right side and a wrong side. This is the wrong side, and this is the right side. So you'll notice that the kind of braids, puff stitches pop out a little bit more on one side, and this is our right side that we want facing out. So for our assembly, we're going to chain 1 and turn, and then we'll just fold it in half like this so that our edges here are lined up. And then we're just going to slip stitch to join along these edges. So I'm just going to insert my hook into this first row and then into my most recent row, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then pull through the loop that's on my hook. And that's how you slip stitch to join together. So you place it through one stitch and then place it through the other stitch. And then it's basically just like a normal slip stitch. So we will just do this all the way along this edge until our stocking is joined up. And then once I get to the end, I will meet you back and show you how to cinch the toe closed. Okay, I just finished slip stitching to join these two edges together. So now I'm going to cut my yarn and leave a yarn tail, maybe about like 20 inches long. We just need it to go around this opening here to cinch it closed. All right, and then I'm going to fasten off. And then I will thread the yarn tail through my needle. And then if you've made any pumpkins with me, this will look familiar. We're just going to weave our yarn tail around this opening here, and then we will cinch it closed. So I think I'm going every other row. It doesn't have to be exact, but just kind of eyeball it. You don't want to put them too close together because then it'll get super bunched up, and you don't want it too far apart because then there will be kind of gaps. So I think every other row is appropriate for this. And then just continue until you get to where we started. And then just pull on the yarn tail to close it up. Just like that. And then once it's closed up, you can weave your yarn tail from one end to the other to kind of secure it and keep it closed. All right, so that's how to cinch the toe. Just gonna do one more to make sure that it's gonna stay secured. And then can just catch this loop as you're pulling it closed, crisscross it like this, and then stick my needle through, and that'll form more of a kind of secure knot. And then we can just weave this through the inside, because remember this is the right side out that's facing us. So we can just push this through, and then we either weave that into the inside or just cut it off. And then we just need to weave in all of our ends and then make our little hanger. Okay, now for our stocking loop, we're just going to foundation single crochet 14. So just like we did at the beginning, we'll make a slip knot and chain 2, and then we will work into that first chain, 2 loops on our hook, yarn over, pull through 1, and then yarn over, pull through 2. So we'll do this 14 times, and then we will fasten off and leave a long tail so that we can secure this onto our stocking. So I'll come back after I have a foundation single crochet of 14. All right, so I just finished my foundation single crochet of 14, and then I'm going to fasten off and leave a long tail, anywhere from like 12 to 20 inches, just so that we can assemble this. And then I'll get my yarn needle and thread the long tail through it. And then I'm going to get this chain that we just made and fold it in half to create a loop like this. Then I'm going to thread my tail through both of these ends to secure them so that they're together. You could do this a few times in a few different spots just to make sure that it's secure. I'll just do one more time. All right, and then what we're going to do is get our stocking, and we want it to kind of be placed right here. So I'm just going to get this end and weave it through the inside of my stocking over to the outside. And I'm going to check that I like that placement before I get this all secured. So ideally you want it to kind of be camouflaged under this cuff that we folded over. And you want the loop to still be able to come out of the stocking far enough. So I think that looks pretty good. So you can just kind of go back in and then catch the loop again somewhere here. The main goal is just to fasten it onto the stocking so that it's secure. So just continue sewing it on in a few different places just to make sure that it's secure. And then make sure you weave in all your ends. And that's pretty much it. And that's it. That's how to crochet these braided puff stockings. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more crochet tutorials. And the full written pattern is linked in the description box. Thanks for watching.